Prince Leopold II of Belgium was born to King Leopold I of Belgium and Louis d'Orléans on April 9, 1835, in Brussels. He was second to hold the title of heir to the Belgian throne after his brother, Louis Philippe, who died before Leopold's birth. He was born onto a family of interwoven noble lineages, including Bourbon and Orléans ancestry on his mother's side, and Saxe-Coburg and Gotha lineage from either parent. At the age of 9, he was named the Duke of Brabant, an honorary title reserved for the Crown Prince of Belgium. Additionally, he was appointed a sub-lieutenant of the Belgian army at this time. His mother died when he was 15. Leopold became King of Belgium on December 17, 1865, at the age of 30. A letter in 1888 stated his goal was to have a strong and prosperous country. Leopold went about this in many ways. The king passed several social reforms, the first of which was in 1879, called the Frères Urbains Law. The law created a secular school system separate from Roman Catholic control. These secular schools were supported by the state, though, just 4 years later, the parliament became a Catholic majority. The Catholic Party was able to regain control of the school. Soon after, a problem arose regarding labor. In 1885, several socialist groups formed the Labour Party, which resulted in a vast increase in unrest. Leopold condoned workers to form labor unions and dismissed the Livret des Ouvriers, a worker book that was used by authorities to keep track of and control the movements of workers. Leopold decreed that children under 12 years of age could not work in factories, which was something unusual for the time, as most children worked in factories in Europe. Children under 16 could work in factories, but could not work at night. Conditions for women were made better since women under 21 could no longer work underground. The financial situation of workers also improved. Workers had the right to be compensated for injuries at the workplace. Finally, workers were given Sunday off. Despite these reforms, the Belgian economy skyrocketed. Leopold achieved this by implementing an intensive labor regime in the Congo. The Congolese mainly collected rubber and ivory, which were to be exported. Overall, Leopold had a positive effect on Belgium. He improved the lives of youths in his country as factory conditions were subject to extensive reforms. Leopold died at Laeken on December 17, 1909. In Belgium, he would be known as a reformer and competent leader. However, in the Congo, his name would become synonymous with that of a tyrant and butcher. Leopold began to go about his acquisition of the Congo through calling for the Brussels Geographic Conference of 1876. This convention consisted largely of expert geographers, wealthy speculators, and humanitarians. The main accomplishment of this conference was the establishment of the International African Association. This institution was made up of international committees that were to convene annually. Its objective was to discover the largely unexplored region of Central Africa, later to be known as the Congo. National committees from each member country were to report to the international body, allowing cooperation amongst European powers to explore and civilize the Congo. However, the initial humanitarian intent of the organization fell through as national interests superseded them. Before its dissolution, Leopold used the association to establish a foothold in the Congo, creating the International Association of the Congo. In creating it, Leopold had been able to solidify a firm hold over a territory 60 times the size of continental Belgium. The United States and Germany both recognized the International Association of the Congo as a legitimate government. Years later, in 1884–85, the Berlin Conference was called for to organize a settlement of Africa. Leopold, having de facto control of the Congo, had little trouble convincing the conference to allow him the territory. Not only that, but the conference also established that the Congo was private property of Leopold, not a Belgian acquisition. It was renamed the Congo Free State. Now in control of a world-recognized colony, Leopold had to consolidate his economic interests. He decreed the establishment of terres vacantes, essentially stating that the vast majority of the colony's land belonged to the state. Leopold exploited this by cutting off free trade, forcing the Congolese to sell to the state at a price set by the state. Though slavery was outlawed by Western powers by this time, the Congolese were forced into a state of near slavery. Leopold's reign over the Congo Free State was different from the other imperial powers' colonies in one major way. While other powers tried to develop their colonies, Leopold made no attempt to develop his, and his exploitive actions resulted in the slowing of the development of the Congo by decreasing the quality of life, exterminating much of the population, and depleting the natural resources of the region. Living and working conditions in the Congo under Leopold were terrible. At first, the main resource targeted by Leopold was ivory. The labor was difficult, usually requiring porters to carry the ivory tusks of the elephants. However, the rubber boom caused by the invention of pneumatic tires made the price of rubber skyrocket. Leopold redirected most of the labor from ivory to rubber collection. Rubber collection was even more grueling than ivory collection, as were the labor enforcers. At first, if a Congolese brought back a sufficient amount of rubber, they were given 1 cup of coarse salt and sometimes a strip of calico. However, the rewards were decreased over time, and eventually the workers received nothing at all. If a Congolese brought back an amount of rubber deemed inadequate, they could be shot on the spot, as an example for others, or flogged with a whip made from dried hippopotamus hide, a punishment that could cause severe injury or death. Over the course of Leopold's ownership of the Congo Free State, the extraction of rubber increased sharply, as did the profits. In 1890, about 100 tons of rubber were exported from the Congo, which increased to nearly 6,000 tons in 1901. Leopold's enforcers in the Congo were a force of 20,000 African soldiers, led by European officers. The brutality of these men increased with the demand for rubber, and they committed many atrocities, such as rape and mass murder. More famously, they were known to cut off the hands of Congolese. This was caused by an order from Leopold to confirm kills were made without wasting ammunition by cutting off the right hand of every native they killed. Soldiers would often cut the hands off living Congolese to increase their kill count and get away with wasting bullets. These policies ended up benefiting Leopold greatly, but at the cost of the Congo. He made over 220 million francs, equal to $1.1 billion today, but almost all the rubber in the equatorial forest was extracted, and many villages were razed to create rubber plantations. Though Leopold's officials hid their atrocities as best as they could, they were eventually discovered by a man named Edmond de Morel. While working on the dockyards in London, he noticed the shipments traveling out of the Congo were filled with rubber and wealth, but the shipments into the Congo consisted only of weapons. Activists from Britain and the United States spoke out against Leopold, including Mark Twain and Joseph Conrad. Conrad wrote the novel, Heart of Darkness, which exposed the mistreatment of the Congolese to the world. The most damning evidence came in the form of Irish diplomat Roger Casement's Casement Report. The report detailed living and working conditions, as well as the massive death toll. In response to this negative press, Leopold had his own report of the conditions of the Congo created. However, the report was not meant to be publicly released, and the report actually supported the claim of Leopold's guilt. He was forced to hand the Congo Free State over to the Belgian government on November 15, 1908. The Belgians would eventually abandon the Congo. On June 30, 1960, the Democratic Republic of the Congo was founded. Ultimately, its history would be marked by instability, corruption, oppression, and violence. The most glaring reason for this is that the country's previous administrators had left behind them a situation that would make effective governing almost impossible. The Congo had no universities or even college graduates who could run the newly born nation. The little infrastructure inside the country was designed so that wealth and resources could easily be siphoned out of the country and was wholly inadequate for tying the nation together. This resulted in the Congo being a logistical quagmire. Communication and travel throughout the country was nigh impossible. The Congo had no industrial sector to speak of. Its economy entirely relied upon the extraction of raw materials. It comes as no surprise, then, that the Congo remains, to this day, one of the single most destitute countries on the planet. From 1971 to 1997, the country was run by a dictator, Joseph Mobutu. The country was also renamed to Zaire. Mobutu's reign was marked by corruption, forced labor, and oppression that stunted any hope the nation had of progress. By the time Mobutu was deposed in 1997, it was for all intents and purposes back to square one for the Congo. Things have still not improved, as the nation has recently been marked by conflict. Following the Rwandan Civil War, Hutu militias flooded into the east of the Congo and used the refugee camps there as staging points to launch attacks on Rwanda. This put into motion a series of internal and external conflicts within the country that are still ongoing. No one is sure how many have died in these conflicts, but estimates place the death toll to range from 900,000 to 5,400,000. It seems as though the legacy of King Leopold II is that of suffering. Whatever actions which benefited Belgium are ultimately outweighed by the unprecedented levels of human misery he caused in the Congo. He turned an entire nation of several million people into his own personal property. His mistreatment of the people is quantifiable in the approximate 8 to 10 million Congolese who died during his 23-year ownership of the Congo Free State, about half of its population. The country that was left behind was one that had no means of caring for itself. Leopold's legacy has been immortalized in the words of Vachel Lindsay in his poem, The Congo. One stanza reads, "Listen to the yell of Leopold's ghost, burning in hell for his hand-maimed host. Hear how the demons chuckle and yell, cutting his hands off down in hell."